So, if you've been following the news about the Texas flooding at all, you've probably seen a million different takes about who is responsible and why and how this all happened. From both the perspective of a climate scientist and someone with years of experience in disaster response, I just kind of want to break down what is true, what isn't, and where do we go from here. So, let's start with the National Weather Service. Texas officials immediately tried to scapegoat the National Weather Service, saying that they did not receive the proper alerts in time to prevent loss of life, which is absolutely false. The New York Times did a great job, which is something they rarely do these days, of listing the exact time sequence of events. They issued those alerts as they were supposed to, and there's no indication whatsoever that anything was delayed or produced without enough time for somebody to react to it. This is in contrast to the tornado alerts that were delayed earlier this year in May over in from the Jackson, Kentucky office, which had no overnight meteorologist on staff. So this is, if we can be sure about anything, this is not the fault of the National Weather Service. They issued those warnings, but the warnings weren't heeded. And now that comes to the second level of responsibility that we have to look at. And that's the job of local officials in making sure that those alerts reach actual people. There's been a lot of discourse on this issue because Texas has paid for a great many things that are arguably not needed and are not good for people of Texas, instead of funding improvements to their alert system. In fact, this specific county, Kerr County, had requested updates to their systems 8 times and were denied. But at the same time, and there's a long list of things that Texas spent money on that you can see online, decided that these were more fruitful efforts, including the money that they spent putting in underwater razor wire to kill people who tried to cross the border through the rivers, which they were then sued and then had to remove, and the removal and the lawsuit in itself all cost about $1 million. So that's pretty obvious as far as Texas officials failing to invest in alert systems that could have given some more warning. Now, there's the storm itself, which, really is what caused all this death. It happened in the middle of the night. It intensified rapidly in the middle of the night when people were sleeping. So already you have more vulnerable people. This is also true of the situation in Kentucky in May when the tornadoes hit overnight. And anytime that there's a very quick disaster while people are sleeping, it means that the response is going to be slow. The likelihood of people hearing alerts is going to be diminished. And so the storm itself does play a major role. Now, the storm was exacerbated by climate change. And we already have academic papers out on this subject. And the atmosphere generally is able to hold 20 to 30% more moisture now because we've heated it almost 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that heating is the reason why all of this rain was able to held for so long and then just dumped. And it was also some atmospheric processes that were happening at the same time with the trough on Tropical Storm Barry remnants. And so that was a big part of the reason that the storm was so quick, so fast, and so unpredictable. The other thing is, and this is at least for one of these stories in this greater story, because now there's over 104 people, I think, that have been confirmed to be dead, and hope for the remaining missing is obviously dwindling every single hour, is the failure of camp officials to monitor the weather situation, knowing that there was severe weather on the way, which they did before they went to sleep. I mean, if you had to, and all these different competing things, if you had to put blame on an individual or group of individuals who were most responsible for the deaths at that camp, it was the camp officials. They failed to keep anyone awake for the weather alerts, and they failed to do their duty to protect those kids. And, this camp had flooded before. They knew where they were at. I mean, all of the things, they failed. They are the reason those kids are dead. But lots of people who were not at that camp died. And some of the people who were at that camp, thanks to the very, valiant efforts of teenage camp counselors, were saved. Camps all along the river were able to evacuate in time, which just further proves that there were warnings issued and that people were able to get to safety. But yeah, it's really horrific the way that the blame is just being tossed around. And I guess maybe because the camp officials are dead, that people are still angry and wanting someone to blame, but that is where the blame goes. And it's really horrible to see this kind of happening because there were so many factors at play, and you can point to one, but not a single thing, except for maybe, the weather itself, can take credit for what happened. And yeah.